The heat at Camp Resolute could melt steel if it stared long enough. Dust rolled through every corridor, coating the metal walls and the soldiers' boots like a second skin. Helicopters thundered overhead, the soundtrack of war. Amid the roaring engines and shouted commands, a new officer walked through the gate, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. Captain Elena Ramirez. Few noticed her at first, just another replacement in a place where faces changed faster than the desert winds. But when she stepped into the aviation hangar, every conversation seemed to pause. Her name tag gleamed faintly in the sunlight, and her dark hair, tightly pulled back, revealed sharp, focused eyes, the kind that measured everything. A few mechanics exchanged looks. Another intel officer? One muttered, "Probably can't tell an Apache from a pickup." Elena heard it but didn't react. She'd learned long ago that silence spoke louder than defense. Inside the operations room, Major Davis, the squadron commander, barely looked up from his tablet. "Captain Ramirez, right? You're our new intel coordinator. You'll be managing aerial surveillance reports and threat pattern analysis." She nodded. "Yes, sir?" "Good. You'll be sitting in the command tent, not in the cockpit. We've got enough pilots." Something in his tone made it clear she wasn't welcome in the air. Elena offered a calm, understood, though every cell in her body protested. For her, the sound of rotor blades had been more than a career. It was a heartbeat. She walked to her quarters, a small metallic container that smelled of sand and diesel. As she unpacked her gear, she touched the old patch folded in her bag, the 101st Aviation Regiment insignia. Once it had meant something. Once she had been one of the best Apache pilots in Iraq. Hawk, they'd called her, for the way she struck targets with unerring precision. Until that day. Until one mission had turned her life into a file-stamped classified incident. Now she was here, grounded, surrounded by soldiers who didn't know her name, and those who did whispered it with doubt. The next morning, she joined the others in the mess hall. Conversation quieted for a moment when she entered. She walked to an empty table and began eating silently, her fork scraping the metal tray. A group of pilots nearby were laughing, their voices carrying easily. "Hey, Ramirez," one called out. Lieutenant Harris, tall, smug, with a grin that never reached his eyes. "You're the new desk pilot, right? Maybe you can file us some weather reports before the next flight." Laughter erupted. Elena looked up, her gaze steady but calm. "Maybe," she said softly. "But I'd suggest you check the dust levels in Sector 7 before takeoff." He blinked. "What?" She stood, placed her tray down, and walked past him. "You're flying into a crosswind pattern. You'll lose lift in the south sector by midday." "But I'm sure you already knew that." The laughter stopped. She left without looking back. In the command tent, Elena spent hours studying aerial reconnaissance. Most officers skimmed reports. She dissected them. Every frame of drone footage, every infrared scan, she examined with the precision of a surgeon. Her notes weren't just technical. They were instinctive, drawn from years of experience flying into those very terrains. One of the analysts leaned over her shoulder. "You're still here?" He asked at midnight. "Patterns don't sleep," she murmured, eyes fixed on the monitor. He smiled faintly. "You were a pilot once, weren't you?" Elena didn't look away from the screen. "Once." The analyst hesitated, then asked quietly, "What happened?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, "I trusted the wrong coordinates." That was all she said, and all he needed to hear. Over the next few days, Elena's presence became impossible to ignore. She didn't talk much, but her briefings were sharper than any PowerPoint report the unit had seen. She saw ambush formations where others saw noise. She noticed heat signatures that didn't match terrain logic. Major Davis began asking for her input more frequently, though never admitting it openly. Still, the resentment from others lingered. To them, she was the woman who didn't belong in the cockpit. And yet, when the flight simulations went wrong, or the mapping software failed to align, it was always Elena who fixed it quietly in the background. She didn't seek praise. She sought understanding, the kind only the sky could give. One late afternoon, she stood by the airfield fence, watching the Apaches return from a patrol. The low hum of rotors filled the air. The pilots disembarked, joking, shouting, stretching. Lieutenant Harris noticed her watching. "You like the view?" he called, wiping sweat from his neck. "I love it," she replied. He smirked. "You ever flown one of these?" Elena's expression didn't change. "A few times." He laughed. "Right. Maybe a simulator at Fort Rucker, huh?" She didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the Apache behind him, its armor scarred, its sensor array slightly off calibration. "You should get that nose turret rebalanced," she said. "Your aim will drift left on long bursts." He frowned. "How would you know that?" Elena turned, walking away. "Because I built my first flight kill record correcting the same problem." Harris stared after her, speechless. That night, alone in her quarters, Elena took out a small metal emblem, a silver Army aviation badge, scratched and worn. She held it in her palm, her reflection glinting faintly in the metal. The wind outside howled across the desert, rattling the windows like distant gunfire. She closed her eyes, the sound merging with memories, radio chatter, burning air, the blinding flash that changed everything. Her breathing quickened. She could still hear her co-pilot's voice from years ago. "We're hit. Pull up, Hawk, pull up." Her hand trembled as she placed the badge back in the drawer. Tomorrow would be another day at the desk. Another day, pretending she'd forgotten how to fly. But deep down, she knew it. The sky wasn't done with her yet. The desert never slept. It just changed moods, from blistering sunlight to frozen starlight, from blinding sandstorms to nights, so still you could hear your own heartbeat echo. Captain Elena Ramirez sat alone in the recon tent, the blue glow of monitors painting her face in cold light. Most of the base was asleep. The last coffee pot gurgled weakly beside her, its contents burned to sludge hours ago. But she stayed, eyes fixed on the flickering drone feed from the northern valley. A convoy of heat signatures crawled along a canyon road, slow, deliberate, too organized to be smugglers. She rewound the footage, watching their formation again. Something felt wrong. She leaned closer, noting the pattern. Trucks at intervals, heavy shielding, escort vehicles on both ends. Military precision, not random insurgency. She marked the coordinates, cross-checking with yesterday's satellite scans. The roads hadn't been active in months. Now, suddenly, a formation like that appeared out of nowhere? It didn't add up. Elena rubbed her temple. The last time she had ignored a gut feeling like this, people had died. A voice startled her from behind. "You're still up?" She turned. It was Sergeant Melvin Green, the night shift comms tech, short, wiry, and perpetually half asleep. "Couldn't sleep," she said quietly. "Something's moving north of here. Too coordinated to be a supply run." Green squinted at the screen. "Could be decoys. These guys like to look important when they're hauling fertilizer." She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the moving dots. "Mind if I ask you something, Captain?" Green said after a pause. "Sure. Back at briefing, Harris said you used to be a pilot. That true?" Elena hesitated. Her hand froze over the keyboard. "It was. What happened?" For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she exhaled slowly, as if releasing something heavy. Wrong call. Right place, wrong intel. Green frowned. Meaning? She turned off one of the monitors, her reflection flickering in the dark screen. Meaning someone fed us coordinates that weren't clean. My team flew into a kill zone. We survived, but one of our Apaches hit friendlies on the ground. I was in command. They said it was pilot error. Easier to write it that way. He fell silent. I requested a reboard review, she added, voice low. It disappeared. The files were sealed. I was reassigned. And you never flew again? Her lips curved faintly. Not officially. Green looked at her, not with pity, but a kind of cautious respect. If you think something's coming, you should tell Major Davis. She nodded slowly. I will, tomorrow. But in her mind, tomorrow already felt too late. At dawn, Helena stood in front of the whiteboard in the ops room. Maps spread out, coordinates circled. The senior officers filtered in, groggy and half-interested. Morning, Captain, Major Davis muttered, pouring coffee. You've got something urgent? Yes, sir. She pointed to the display. Satellite scans show increased vehicle activity across Sector 11. Heat signatures consistent with weapon transport, possibly heavy artillery. Pattern matches pre-assault logistics we saw before the Kandahar ambush 2 years ago. Lieutenant Harris snorted softly. Captain, those roads are abandoned goat trails. Probably smugglers. Elena ignored him. With armored escorts and convoy spacing of exactly 500 meters? Davis raised a brow. You're saying they're preparing for an attack? I'm saying, she replied firmly, if they strike, it'll be here. Camp Resolute, within 48 hours. And our northern perimeter is wide open. The room went quiet for a moment. Then Harris laughed. You've been here, 2 weeks? You think you've figured out what our entire recon team missed? Elena's gaze stayed locked on the map. Sometimes it helps to see from the sky instead of the screen. He rolled his eyes. Right, but you're grounded, remember? A few chuckles rose from the group. Even Davis looked mildly uncomfortable. Captain, he said finally, I appreciate the analysis, but we can't shift defenses based on speculation. Send your data to Recon. We'll review it in tomorrow's brief. Elena stood still for a second, then gathered her files quietly. Understood, sir. When she left the room, no one noticed how tightly she was gripping her pen until the plastic cracked in her hand. That night, the wind picked up again. The desert was whispering, a low, unending hum that only the sleepless heard. Elena sat outside her quarters, staring at the black horizon. The stars looked like holes punched in a vast, cold sheet. She could feel the air shift, something ancient inside her, recognizing the rhythm of danger. Her mind replayed the faces of the men she'd lost years ago. Chief Warrant Officer Dale Parker, her co-pilot and best friend. His laugh, his calm voice over the radio, the final static-filled words. We're hit. Pull up. Hawk. She squeezed her eyes shut, the memory slicing through her composure. She could still see the explosion, the plume of fire that turned night into day, the chaos on the ground, the screams through the headset. And then the silence. Afterward, the report said, pilot error. That single phrase buried everything, truth, pain, and her career. But she'd never stopped hearing Dale's voice in the rotors, in the wind, in every sound of an Apache taking off. A sudden alert tone from the comm center jolted her back. She hurried inside. Captain? Sergeant Green called out, waving her over. We're picking up chatter, encrypted frequency, near the northern ridge. She leaned over the screen. The transmission was faint, broken, but clear enough to hear fragments of a dialect she recognized instantly. Convoy ... ready ... coordinates ... West approach ... tonight. Alana's pulse spiked. She checked the time stamp, less than 5 minutes old. This isn't training noise, she muttered. They're staging already. Green frowned. You sure? The encryption is military grade. They're not smugglers. They're organized. She turned and sprinted toward the command quarters. Major Davis was half asleep when she burst in. Sir, she said urgently, enemy convoy movement confirmed on encrypted radio. They're less than 15 clicks north. He rubbed his eyes. It's probably ghost chatter, Ramirez. Calm down. Sir, we don't have time to doubt. If they strike, we'll lose the airstrip before sunrise. Davis sighed. We'll verify it at briefing, sir. She snapped, louder than she intended. If we wait for confirmation, you won't have a base left to confirm. He froze at her tone. For the first time, he saw not a desk officer, but something fierce, something deeply certain. But he shook his head. Stand down, Captain. I'll alert recon at first light. Elena's jaw clenched. She saluted tightly and walked out. In the hallway, she stopped for a long moment, staring at the dim light above the exit. Her pulse drummed like rotor blades. By midnight, she was back in the recon tent, alone again. The screens flickered, static crawling across the images. She zoomed in on the northern perimeter, nothing visible but sand. Then, for a fraction of a second, a spark, a glint of light reflecting off metal. Then another. Then 20 more. Her stomach dropped. She counted. 15 armored trucks, maybe more, moving in formation, heading straight for Camp Resolute. Her hand shook as she reached for the radio. Base Command, this is Ramirez. Enemy armor sighted north sector. I repeat. But before she could finish, the power flickered. The screens went black. A moment later, a deep rumble rolled across the desert, distant, growing louder. Elena's heart pounded. The sound was unmistakable. Engines, lots of them. She ran out into the cold night air. The horizon glowed faintly red. The storm she'd predicted was already here. And this time, she wouldn't stay grounded. The morning sun over Camp Resolute burned through the haze like a warning flare. The base buzzed with routine noise. Refueling trucks, shouting mechanics, whirring tools. But beneath that hum was tension, almost electric. Captain Elena Ramirez walked briskly across the tarmac, clutching a report under her arm. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were bloodshot, but sharp, fixed on the hangar ahead. Inside, the pilots were gathered for the daily briefing. Laughter echoed between the steel walls, too casual for a war zone. Elena paused for a second before stepping in. Lieutenant Harris saw her first. Morning, Captain, he drawled, leaning against a crate. Here to teach us how to fly by PowerPoint again? The room chuckled. Elena ignored him and spread her files across the operations table. Satellite feed confirmed movement in the northern ridge. 15, maybe 16 armored trucks. They're coming this way. Harris raised an eyebrow. You mean those blurry dots from last night? The ones nobody else could verify? Those blurry dots, she said evenly, just jammed our frequency for 40 seconds at 0300 hours. That's tactical interference, not static. The laughter quieted a little. Major Davis looked up from his coffee. Captain, we checked the coordinates. Recon Patrol saw nothing. You might be reading false signals again. Her jaw tightened. Sir, if I'm wrong, you lose a few hours of sleep. If I'm right, you lose the entire base. The room went still. Davis hesitated, then sighed. All right, Ramirez. I'll send a drone sweep. Harris smirked. There you go. Drones can handle it. No need for panic. Elena gathered her papers calmly. If drones could win wars, Lieutenant, pilots like you wouldn't exist. A few of the younger officers hid their grins. Harris flushed red. As Elena walked out, she heard one of them whisper, "Someone should remind her she's not cleared to fly." She didn't turn around. She didn't have to. Their words only confirmed what she already knew. They wouldn't believe her until it was too late. An hour later, the drone launched. Elena watched from the control room, arms crossed tightly. The screen flickered as the feed stabilized, revealing empty ridges and flat sands. The operator glanced at her nervously. "Nothing so far, ma'am." "Keep scanning west," she said. Static rolled across the monitor, then cleared, showing a narrow canyon, its shadows deep and unnatural. She leaned forward. "Zoom in." At first, it looked like rock formations. Then, something metallic caught the light. "There," she whispered. "Hold that frame." The image sharpened. Shapes beneath camo netting. Tires. Turrets. Gun barrels. Her pulse spiked. Those are vehicles. Armored. Parked in formation. The operator swallowed. How the hell did they hide them from the satellite pass? "They were waiting for us to stop looking," Elena said softly. She hit the intercom button. "Major Davis, you need to see this." But before the feed could transmit, the screen went black again. Total signal loss. Then the power flickered across the base. "EMP?" the operator gasped. Elena's heart dropped. "No, they're closer than we thought." Moments later, the sirens wailed. The first explosion came from the northern perimeter, a deep, rolling blast that shook the command building. Dust and smoke burst into the air like a rising storm. Soldiers scrambled across the yard, shouting orders. Vehicles roared to life. The smell of burning diesel filled the wind. Major Davis's voice boomed over the intercom. "All units to defense positions. Pilots, prep aircraft for immediate readiness." Elena ran toward the hangar, boots pounding the dirt. She could already see flames in the distance. The enemy had breached the outer fence. Inside, chaos reigned. Mechanics shouted as fuel lines hissed. 2 Apaches were already damaged, one from shrapnel, the other from a collapsing canopy. Harris was yelling over the noise. "Get the Hellfire pods loaded. We'll take off in pairs." Elena grabbed his arm. "You can't go up yet. The wind direction's wrong, and the smoke's too thick. You'll lose visibility within a minute." He shook her off. "I'll take my chances, Captain. You stick to your spreadsheets." She bit back a retort as he climbed into the cockpit. The turbine engines whined to life, roaring louder and louder, then sputtered. A mechanic shouted, "Fuel lines compromised." "It's leaking." Harris cursed and jumped out, his face pale. "We can't fly this." Elena scanned the hangar. Only one Apache stood untouched, its rotors still, its frame gleaming faintly under emergency lights. It was the last operational bird on base. Her pulse quickened. Every instinct inside her screamed, "Get in the air now." But she wasn't cleared. She wasn't supposed to fly again. She looked at the comms board, dead. The radar, flickering. The control tower, unmanned. The base was blind. Then she heard a voice behind her. Captain Ramirez. It was Sergeant Green, carrying an armful of data tablets. "They've jammed every frequency. Command's trying to reroute signals, but we're deaf. How many ground units still active?" She asked quickly. "Less than half. They're getting pinned by machine gun fire near the west wall." She nodded slowly, her decision forming faster than fear could stop it. "Green," she said quietly, "get me flight access codes for Apache Unit Bravo 1. He blinked. "What? Captain, you're not authorized." "Then don't authorize me," she said. "Just open the hangar doors." Outside, Another explosion rocked the airfield. Metal debris rained from the sky, clattering off the tarmac. Harris ducked behind a crate, shouting, "We've got to wait for command orders." Elena's voice cut through the chaos. "By the time they give them, we'll all be dead." She climbed into the Apache, sliding into the pilot's seat as if she'd never left it. Her hands moved automatically. Switches, ignition, weapon systems, diagnostics. Everything came alive beneath her touch. The rotors began to spin, kicking up dust and smoke. Green ran to the front of the hangar, eyes wide. "Captain, what are you doing?" She looked down at him, helmet in place, eyes calm and steady. "What I was trained to do," she said. The engines roared. For a heartbeat, no one moved, just the deafening rhythm of blades cutting the air. Then the hangar doors began to open, sunlight flooding the interior like a rising tide. Harris shouted over the comms, "You'll be court-martialed for this." Elena didn't look at him. "Not if we're all still alive." The Apache lifted from the ground, its shadow sliding over the burning base. Soldiers on the field stopped and stared, some in disbelief, others in awe. The radio crackled. "Unidentified pilot, you are not cleared for takeoff." "I repeat, you are not." She switched frequencies. "This is Captain Ramirez. Call sign Hawk. I have visual on enemy armor. Beginning engagement." The voice on the other end faltered. "Hawk? Ramirez? That can't be." But she was already gone, banking hard north toward the smoke. From above, the battlefield unfolded like a nightmare. Columns of dust, fireballs, moving dots that were enemy trucks. She leveled out, eyes locked on the horizon. Her hands were steady, every muscle remembering what to do. "All right," she whispered. "Let's see if you've missed me." The targeting reticle flickered across her HUD. The first rocket lock beeped. Elena exhaled and pulled the trigger. A streak of light arced through the sky. One explosion. Then another. Then the radio filled with cheers. Ground troops realizing someone was up there, fighting back. Back at the base, Harris watched the radar blips disappear one by one. Enemy trucks wiped from the screen. He lowered his headset slowly, eyes wide. Major Davis walked in, stunned. "Who the hell's flying that Apache?" Harris swallowed. "Captain Ramirez." Davis's face went pale. "She's supposed to be grounded." Harris stared at the burning horizon. "Not anymore." The desert slept beneath a moonless sky, silent, black, endless. Only the faint hum of diesel engines broke the stillness. Camp Resolute's perimeter lights flickered against the sand, restless and uneasy. Inside the operations tent, alarms blared. "Base under attack." "Repeat, incoming fire from North Ridge," shouted a young corporal, his voice cracking over the static. In seconds, the calm dissolved into chaos. Soldiers ran for cover, grabbing rifles, throwing on vests. The night erupted. Explosions thundered in the distance, streaks of light cutting through the dark horizon like furious comets. Major Davis burst into the room, his uniform half-buttoned. "Where the hell is our aerial team?" "Lieutenant Harris and Carter are still on standby, sir. They're refueling. Tell them to move, now." Elena was already there, headset in hand, scanning the live feeds. The satellite imagery showed movement. Dozens of heat signatures advancing from the North Ridge, spreading like wildfire. "They're not random," she said, voice steady despite the panic. "They're flanking, forming a crescent. They'll breach the perimeter in under 8 minutes." 8 minutes? Davis barked. "We can't even get the birds airborne in 5. Elena's eyes didn't move from the screen. "Then we're already behind." Outside, chaos reigned. The sky lit up with tracer fire. Mortar slammed into the sand, throwing up geysers of dust. Medics ran toward the impact zones. Shouting filled the air. Harris sprinted toward the helipad, helmet under his arm, adrenaline surging. "Get that Apache online," he yelled to the crew chief. "We're going up." But as the mechanic frantically reattached the fueling hose, a deafening blast rocked the ground. A mortar landed just meters away. The explosion threw Harris backward, slamming him into the side of a Humvee. "Lieutenant, down!" Someone screamed. Smoke filled the air, thick and bitter. Elena burst through the haze, ducking low. She saw Harris slumped against the vehicle, bleeding but conscious. He coughed, clutching his chest. "I can't fly." "Cockpit's yours, Captain." Elena froze. Around her, the airfield burned. The Apache sat ready, blades idle, cockpit open, waiting like a beast eager for command. Major Davis' voice crackled through her radio. "We've got less than 6 minutes before they breach. We need air support now." Elena looked at Harris, at the chaos, at the dark sky roaring with distant fire. Then she said quietly, "I'm taking it up." "Captain Ramirez, you're not cleared. Clearance is a luxury." "Sir," she cut in, already strapping on her flight harness. She climbed into the cockpit, fingers flying across the console like muscle memory reborn. Her heart hammered as the systems came online, the growl of turbines, the whirring blades gaining speed. The familiar vibration hit her chest, that deep living pulse she hadn't felt in years. "Hawk 1 lifting off," she said into the radio, voice calm, command strong. Davis' reply came through static. "Ramirez, what the hell do you think you're?" But the roar of the Apache drowned him out as the aircraft surged upward, slicing through the smoke. The ground below was chaos, fire, shadows, and the relentless surge of enemy troops advancing in waves. Elena banked hard left, the Apache's sensors locking onto targets like an animal scenting prey. Multiple heat signatures. "Switching to Hellfire," she murmured, her fingers dancing over the controls. Her co-pilot, a young technician named Cole, who had jumped in last minute, stared in awe. "Captain, are you sure?" "Trust me," she said, eyes sharp. "I was born for this." She pulled the trigger. The missile screamed from the rail. A streak of white light had found its mark with surgical precision. The explosion tore through the ridge, a thunderclap echoing across the valley. "Target 1 neutralized," Cole said, voice trembling. 14 more to go," Elena replied. The Apache roared through the sky, its rotors slicing through smoke and flame. Each second felt stretched thin, every decision a matter of life or death. She banked low, skimming just above the dunes, evading enemy fire. A streak of tracer rounds flashed past her window. "They've got anti-air," Cole shouted. "Then let's make them miss." She dove hard, the helicopter shaking violently. The ground came rushing up, and then she pulled up in a perfect arc, lining up her next shot mid-turn. Hellfire, away. Another detonation. Another enemy position gone. Cole was speechless. "You're flying like I never stopped." Her hands were steady, eyes locked on the chaos below. To anyone watching, it was poetry, steel, and fire moving in perfect unison. The radio erupted with static-laced voices. "Who's flying that bird?" "Holy hell, that's Ramirez." "She's in the air." "She's taking out the ridge." But the enemy wasn't finished. "Captain, new signatures, east flank." Cole warned. "They're targeting our fuel depot." Elena's pulse quickened. She swung the Apache around, full throttle, rotors whining against the strain. "Hold on." She shot across the base, dipping low enough that the desert dust exploded beneath her. The east flank came into view, a cluster of vehicles and rocket teams setting up along the dune. "Cole, give me our lock now." "Locked. Fire!" 2 missiles streaked out. The explosion that followed was blinding. Fuel trucks ignited like suns. Shock waves rippled through the air, tossing sand high into the night. Elena banked hard to avoid the fireball, the Apache cutting a clean arc through the chaos. That made 9. "Captain, more targets behind the ridge. RPGs incoming." "Copy," she said, diving low. The warning alarm screamed inside the cockpit. "Missile lock. Flares out." Cole yelled. The Apache spewed glowing decoys into the air, a fiery distraction that sent enemy missiles spiraling harmlessly into the sand. Elena didn't flinch. She swung the helicopter around again, nose down, guns blazing. The M230 chain gun roared, tearing through vehicles and enemy lines. Sparks erupted across the ridge. The comms filled with shouting, soldiers cheering, disbelief turning to adrenaline-fueled awe. "She's got them. She's clearing the whole ridge. That's 15 confirmed targets. She's saving the base." Elena's breath came hard, sweat streaking down her temples. The sky was full of smoke and flame, her symphony. Then the last explosion faded, and for the first time, silence returned. Only the rhythmic thump of rotor blades filled the night. She hovered over the ridge, scanning for any remaining heat signatures. There were none. Cole whispered, "We did it." Elena exhaled slowly, the adrenaline easing into exhaustion. "No, Cole," she said quietly. "They'll be back. This was just the first wave." She turned the Apache toward the base, the fires below painting her cockpit in flickering gold. For the soldiers on the ground, the sight of the lone Apache hovering over the burning desert became something unforgettable, a ghost in the smoke, a symbol of defiance. And in the command tent, Major Davis stood in stunned silence, headset slack in his hand. "She wasn't just an intel officer," he murmured. "She was our damn ace." That night, as dawn bled into the horizon, Elena landed the Apache softly beside the hangar. Her legs trembled as she stepped down, exhaustion finally catching up. The soldiers around her stared, eyes wide, disbelief etched across every face. Lieutenant Harris, now bandaged but conscious, limped forward. You flew like..." Elena gave a faint smile. "Like I remembered how." He stared at her, then slowly extended his hand. "Guess we owe you one, Hawk." She took it, firm, steady. The call sign felt strange, old, but right. The sun rose over the desert like a reluctant witness, bleeding orange through the smoke. Camp Resolute was quiet for the first time in days. No alarms, no shouting, no thunder of explosions. Just the soft rustle of wind brushing through the charred remains of what had nearly become a graveyard. Soldiers moved slowly across the base, some carrying wounded, others repairing what could be saved. The scent of burnt fuel hung thick in the air. In the middle of it all stood Captain Elena Ramirez, helmet tucked under her arm, the Apache behind her still cooling from its furious night. Her flight suit was smeared with soot and oil, her hair clinging to her forehead. Yet her eyes, steady, unshaken, burned with the same focused calm that had carried her through the storm. A medic passed by and stopped. "Captain, you should get checked out." "I'm fine," she replied softly. "You just flew through hell. I've seen worse." The medic nodded, quietly awed, and moved on. By noon, word had spread far beyond Camp Resolute. The radio chatter across Allied channels was full of it. One Apache took out 15 targets last night. Pilot's name's Ramirez. She's not even assigned to the flight roster. They say she saved the entire base. When Major Davis finally approached her, his tone was cautious, somewhere between admiration and disbelief. "Captain, he began, his voice low. "I don't know whether to commend you or court-martial you." She didn't flinch. "Sir, the situation required immediate response." There wasn't time to wait. He studied her for a long moment, then exhaled. "You went against direct orders. You disobeyed chain of command. But you also prevented total loss of the base." "I did what had to be done." "That's not how the Army sees it," he said quietly. "Command's sending investigators from the Air Combat Review Board. They'll want statements, yours especially." Elena nodded. "I expected that." Hours later, the review team arrived. 4 officers in pressed uniforms, briefcases in hand, their demeanor sharp and cold. They gathered in the operations tent, where the screen still flickered with replayed footage of the night's battle. Elena stood before them, her expression unreadable. "Captain Ramirez," a senior investigator began, "you were officially listed as ground support intelligence, not flight personnel. How did you come to pilot an H-64 Apache without clearance?" I responded to an immediate combat emergency. The assigned pilot was incapacitated. "So you took control of a multi-million-dollar aircraft without authorization?" Her voice stayed even. "With authorization, we'd be dead." The investigator's eyes narrowed. "You realize, Captain, that if this mission had failed, you'd be facing criminal negligence charges." Elena met his stare. "If it had failed, none of us would be here to discuss it." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Even the hum of the monitor seemed to fade. Major Davis cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, you've seen the telemetry. She took out 15 hostiles in 8 minutes, prevented the enemy from reaching our perimeter, and saved 24 lives in the process. You want to reprimand her? Fine. But you do it knowing she's the reason this flag still flies." The lead investigator gave a small nod, jotting down a note. "We'll include your statement in the report, Major." He turned back to Elena. "Captain Ramirez, you'll remain grounded until this inquiry concludes." She nodded once. "Understood." When the officers left, the tent fell silent again. Davis looked at her. For the first time, really looked. "You were a pilot once," he said quietly. "I am a pilot," she corrected. He gave a faint, wry smile. "You know what I mean." She hesitated. "I was with the 101st in Mosul. Apache unit, Calcine Hawk." Davis frowned. "The Mosul incident. You were the one?" She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said enough. He exhaled slowly. "That mission's still classified. I read parts of the report. It said pilot error caused the friendly fire." Her jaw tightened. "That's what they said. Was it true?" Her gaze drifted toward the tent flap, where sunlight cut across the floor in sharp golden lines. "Not exactly. Intel coordinates were tampered with. I fired where command told me. When we confirmed the target, it wasn't insurgents. It was one of ours." Davis was silent. "They grounded me after that," she continued. "Said I was unfit for aerial duty. I didn't fight it. Maybe I thought I deserved it. But last night, she said softly, wasn't about redemption. It was survival." Later that evening, as the camp settled into a fragile calm, the soldiers gathered around the mess hall fire pit, a ritual that felt almost human again after so much chaos. Someone strummed a guitar. Another passed around canteens. Laughter, tentative and tired, drifted through the air. Elena sat quietly on the edge of the group, watching the flames. Lieutenant Harris limped over and dropped down beside her. "Never thought I'd see you in that cockpit," he said. "Neither did I." He chuckled softly. "Guess I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything," she replied. "Yeah, I do. You could have left me out there." She looked into the fire. "Leaving people behind isn't in my blood." There was a pause, the kind that feels heavier than words. Then Harris grinned faintly. You know, everyone's calling you Ghost Hawk now. She raised an eyebrow. Ghost Hawk? Yeah, 'cause you came out of nowhere, smoked the entire ridge, and vanished before half of us even knew who was flying. It's kinda badass. Elena laughed, quietly, the sound foreign even to her own ears. Ghost Hawk. Sounds like a comic book. Maybe, he said. But it's real to us. That night, sleep didn't come easily. She lay in her cot, staring at the ceiling, the hum of generators outside mixing with distant winds. Her mind replayed everything, the flight, the explosions, the faces, the sound of the gunfire. But beneath it all, something else stirred. The voice of her old co-pilot from that mission years ago. Don't freeze, Hawk. You never freeze. She turned onto her side, exhaling deeply. The sky had taken so much from her. Her career, her reputation, her peace. But for the first time in years, it had also given something back. Purpose. At dawn, the camp PA crackled to life. Attention all personnel. Command has requested Captain Ramirez report to HQ immediately. The announcement echoed across the base. Elena rose slowly, buttoning her uniform with precise, practiced movements. She caught her reflection in the small metal mirror. Tired eyes, but clear. Outside, the morning light glowed across the tarmac. Mechanics were already working on the Apache again. Her Apache now, whether the paperwork said so or not. She walked toward HQ, the whispers following her like shadows. Is she in trouble? Or getting promoted? Either way, she's a legend now. When she stepped inside, Major Davis was waiting. Beside him stood a colonel she hadn't seen before, tall, serious, with a folder under his arm. Captain Ramirez, the colonel said. We've reviewed the footage, the testimonies, and the outcome. Yes, sir. He opened the folder, then looked at her. You broke protocol. You disobeyed standing orders. But you also demonstrated unmatched combat capability and tactical brilliance. She stood still, silent. As of this morning, the colonel continued, the inquiry has been closed. You are reinstated to active flight duty under Special Operations Command. Congratulations, Captain. You're officially back in the sky. For the first time in years, Elena allowed herself a smile. Small, restrained, but real. Thank you, sir. The colonel nodded. Your new mission brief arrives tomorrow. Get some rest. You'll need it. As she turned to leave, Davis called after her. Welcome back, Hawk. Outside, the desert shimmered in gold. Elena walked toward the hangar, wind tugging at her sleeves. The Apache sat gleaming under the sun, rebuilt, waiting, her wings restored. She stopped beside it, running a hand along its hull. You and me again, she whispered. And for the first time since Mosul, she felt the world align. Not perfectly, but enough. The sky had taken her once. Now it had called her home. 3 weeks after the attack, Captain Elena Ramirez was no longer an outcast. She was an icon. Across Camp Resolute, her name carried weight. Mechanics nodded respectfully when she walked past. Young recruits whispered her call sign, Ghost Hawk, with a mix of awe and disbelief. But Elena didn't care for titles. She only cared for the sky. And now it was hers again. She stood beside her Apache in the hangar, tightening her gloves. The desert morning shimmered beyond the open doors, the kind of heat that turned air into glass. Lieutenant Harris limped over, still recovering, but back in uniform. Got your orders yet? He asked. She nodded slightly. New mission, classified. They're flying me out tonight. He smirked. They grounded you for years. Now they can't get you in the air fast enough. Elena gave a faint smile. The Army has a short memory when it needs miracles. By nightfall, she was aboard a C-130 transport jet heading north. Inside the dimly lit cabin sat a small team of operators. Task Force Viper, the kind of soldiers whose names never appeared on reports. The man across from her, a broad-shouldered sergeant with a scar across his jaw, offered a nod. "You're the pilot?" "Captain Ramirez," she said. "You can call me Hawk." He grinned. "Heard about you. Thought it was a rumor. Most good things start that way." Their commander, Colonel Briggs, a no-nonsense veteran with a voice like gravel, briefed them mid-flight. 2 nights ago, a convoy carrying prototype drone components vanished near the Karash Mountains. Satellite recon picked up movement in the same region, possibly insurgent forces using old caves as storage sites. Our job: verify, recover, or destroy. He turned to Elena. "We're sending one bird, your Apache. You'll provide overwatch, extraction cover, and if necessary, fire support." Elena nodded. "Rules of engagement?" "Minimal. This is off the books." She didn't flinch. "Understood." They landed at a forward outpost under the cover of darkness. The Apache waited on the pad, refueled, armed, and ready. The rotors gleamed faintly under floodlights. As Elena climbed into the cockpit, something tugged at her. That old, uneasy instinct she'd learned to trust more than any radar. "Captain," Cole, her new co-pilot, said from behind her. "You okay?" She adjusted her helmet. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how the last time I flew a mission with tampered coordinates, it didn't end well." He frowned. "You think this op's dirty?" She didn't answer directly. "I think trust is earned, not issued." At 0300 hours, they lifted off. The Apache rose into the desert sky, blades thundering against the stillness. Below, the task force convoy moved like black ants across the sand, headlights dimmed to slits. Elena monitored the thermal feed. No heat signatures ahead for 20 clicks. "Looks clean." Briggs' voice came over the comms. "Roger that, Ghost Hawk. Maintain overwatch." For an hour, the flight was uneventful until the radar pinged. "Captain," Cole said quietly, "I've got movement, bearing 320. Small group, 6 to 8 hostiles." Elena zoomed in. Through the infrared view, the figures moved fast, too fast for a wandering patrol. "They're flanking the convoy," she said. "Orders?" "Mark them." She locked the Hellfire missiles and fired. 2 sharp trails of fire streaked into the dark, slamming into the ridge. The explosion lit up the night, and with it, chaos. The radio erupted. "Ambush! Multiple contacts." "We're taking fire." "Copy that?" Elena said, banking hard. "We're coming in hot." She dove low, skimming the canyon edge. Gunfire flashed below. Rockets screamed past her nose. She didn't hesitate. She flipped the Apache sideways, unleashing a rain of rounds from the M230 chain gun. 2 vehicles destroyed, Cole reported. "But they're still coming." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Then we go lower." The Apache tore through the canyon, its rotors whipping sand into violent storms. The world blurred. Fire, smoke, and the rhythmic growl of gunfire. "Cole, switch to thermal," she ordered. "Find their stronghold." He scanned the feed. "Got something. Large heat pocket under the ridge. Looks like a tunnel entrance." Elena's stomach tightened. "Cave storage." "That's where they took the convoy." "Orders?" "Mark it for strike." Before she could act, the radar flashed red. "Incoming 2 missiles." "Deploy flares." Bright countermeasures erupted behind them, but 1 missile stayed locked. Elena yanked the controls hard, twisting through the canyon like a dancer avoiding death. The missile streaked past, missing by inches, and detonated behind them, shaking the helicopter violently. "Systems holding," Cole shouted. Elena's voice stayed calm. "They've got modern launchers. This isn't some scavenger cell." Cole hesitated. "You think someone fed them our route?" "I think someone wanted us to find them." They regrouped above the ridge, hovering silently as the battle below faded. Task Force Viper had taken casualties but was still moving. Briggs' voice came through, strained but alive. "Ghost Hawk, we've located the convoy. Repeat, we found it. But the containers are gone. Empty." Elena frowned. "Gone? How's that possible?" "Someone beat us here." "Who?" No answer came. Just static. Then another blip on her radar. "Cole, do you see that?" "Yeah. But it's not ground movement. It's airborne." "Airborne?" The shape appeared on her screen, small, fast, and flying erratically. That's a drone," Cole said, astonished. "But it's not one of ours." Elena's blood ran cold. "It's the prototype. The very tech they'd been sent to recover, stolen, reactivated, and now flying in hostile hands." The drone banked hard, almost mocking them. Then it launched a micro-rocket straight toward the convoy below. Elena didn't think. She reacted. She pushed the Apache forward, intercepting. "Cole, arm chain gun, manual control." "Captain, that's suicide." "Do it." The desert exploded in flashes of white light. Elena lined up the shot, milliseconds to aim. "Target locked. Fire." The chain gun roared. Tracers tore through the sky, colliding with the drone mid-flight. The explosion was instantaneous, a bloom of fire that illuminated the entire canyon. The shockwave rattled the cockpit. Cole let out a breathless laugh. "You just took down a stolen government drone with a machine gun." "Add that to the report," she said dryly. When they returned to base, the silence in the debriefing room was thicker than smoke. Colonel Briggs paced, jaw tight. "Do you realize what you just destroyed?" he said finally. Elena didn't blink. "A stolen prototype that was about to kill my team. That prototype was worth $80 million. She stared him down. "So was the convoy you lost." He slammed his fist on the table. "You don't understand the politics here." "No, sir," she said evenly. "You don't understand the battlefield." The room went still. Even Cole stayed quiet. Briggs' eyes burned with restrained fury, but beneath it, something else. Fear. Helena realized it then. This mission wasn't about recovery. It was about containment. Someone high up wanted that drone gone, not found. And she had just ruined their plan. Later, in the dim glow of the barracks, she sat alone, hands clasped, mind racing. The mission had been wrong from the start. Too precise, too exposed, too convenient. And if her instincts were right, someone in command had used them as pawns. Cole entered quietly. "You think Briggs knew?" She didn't look up. He didn't need to. Orders came from higher. Higher like who? Elena met his eyes. The same people who buried the Mosul report. Cole's face went pale. She stood, grabbing her flight jacket. "They thought grounding me would silence me. They were wrong. Where are you going?" "To find out who's pulling the strings." As she stepped out into the cold desert air, the night sky stretched wide and endless above her, stars glittering like silent witnesses. The Ghost Hawk was back in the air. But this time, she wasn't just fighting enemies. She was hunting the truth. The desert was burning. Not from the sun this time, but from the storm that Captain Elena Ramirez had unleashed. Below her, 15 enemy vehicles lay twisted and smoking, their ammunition still crackling in the sand like angry insects. The radio was alive with disbelief and shouting voices. soldiers on the ground who had just watched an impossible feat unfold. "Command, this is Iron Hawk." Elena's voice came steady through the cons, though her pulse thundered in her veins. 15 confirmed. Sector secure. Returning for rearm. Silence. Then Major Davis's voice came through, hoarse with shock. "Repeat, 15? "Affirmative, sir." 15 confirmed kills in 8 minutes. There was another silence, the kind that meant even the radios didn't know what to say. When Elena brought the Apache down to the forward base, the entire camp seemed frozen. Mechanics stared. Infantrymen dropped what they were doing. Dust swirled around the spinning rotors as she landed, the machine hissing with heat. She shut the engines off, unstrapped her helmet, and stepped out. For the first time since she'd arrived at Camp Resolute, people looked at her, not as an outsider, not as a woman who didn't belong, but as something else entirely. Something they couldn't quite name. Lieutenant Harris was standing near the refueling truck, his mouth half open. That was you?" Elena nodded calmly. "You should recalibrate the left turret stabilizer," she said, rushing past him. "You're 2 degrees off target." He blinked, watching her walk away, as the maintenance crew rushed toward the battle-scarred Apache like worshippers to a shrine. Inside the command tent, chaos erupted. Davis's staff crowded around the live feed playback, the one Elena had recorded through the FIU, gunship's targeting systems. The screen flickered between thermal and visual, showing an Apache slicing through the valley at low altitude, missiles flying in precision arcs, explosions blooming like red flowers. She hit every target, one tech muttered in awe. "No misses. Not one." "That's impossible," another said. 8 minutes, 15 enemy assets? She made it look easy. Then Davis entered, his face unreadable. He stared at the footage, arms crossed, saying nothing for several seconds. When it ended, he turned to Elena. "You were never just an intel officer, were you?" "No, sir." "You disobeyed orders." "Yes, sir." "You took an aircraft without authorization." "Yes, sir." He stepped closer, voice low. "And you just saved 24 men from being wiped out. Do you have any idea what would have happened if you hadn't gone up there?" Elena looked him in the eyes. "I do. That's why I went." Davis stared at her a moment longer. Then, unexpectedly, his lips curved into something almost like respect. "You've just made my entire squadron look like they're still in training." Outside, word spread like wildfire. Every corridor buzzed with the same story. The intel officer flew an Apache. She took out 15 in 8 minutes. No one's ever done that. Even the higher-ups at regional command called in, wanting to confirm the rumor. By dusk, when Elena finally stepped outside, the base had changed. Soldiers nodded at her as she passed. Mechanics straightened when she walked by. Even Harris, who once mocked her, offered a silent salute. For a moment, she felt a strange warmth, not pride exactly, but something deeper, recognition, after years of silence, of being judged, of carrying ghosts she couldn't name. She'd finally been seen again. Later that night, Davis called her to the briefing tent. The mood was tense but quiet, a different kind of electricity now. "Command's reviewed your footage," he said. "They've reclassified you as active flight status, effective immediately." Elena blinked. I'm reinstated?" He nodded. "They're calling it a provisional reinstatement, pending review. But the brass saw what you did. They want you leading tomorrow's recon strike." She didn't answer right away. Her mind flashed back to that day. The crash, the smoke, the screaming radio. Davis studied her. "You okay with that?" Elena took a deep breath. "I've been waiting for this since the day they grounded me, sir." He smiled faintly. "Then don't make us regret it." Outside, The desert night stretched endless and quiet. Elena walked to the hangar, stopping beside the Apache she'd flown earlier. Its hull was scorched, its rotors still cooling, but it stood proud, a metal beast that had shared her fury and her redemption. She rested a hand on its armor. "We're not done yet," she whispered. Her reflection in the cockpit glass was split by the faint crack in the canopy, a reminder that victory never came without scars. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in the desert, the remnants of the enemy regrouped. The radio intercepts caught fragments of their chatter, talk of revenge, of regrouping for a night strike. Elena listened to the recordings later that night in the ops tent. Harris and the analyst sat beside her. "They're angry," Harris muttered. "They lost everything." Elena leaned closer to the speakers. "No," she said quietly. "They're preparing something bigger. They're not retreating. They're hunting." Harris frowned. "How can you tell?" She pointed at the faint static between the words, a pulse-like sound most people would miss. "That's not interference. That's encrypted coordination. They're calling in reinforcements." Davis, standing behind her, cursed under his breath. "How soon?" "Hours," Elena said. "Maybe less." The base shifted into full alert. Floodlights cut through the night, soldiers running to defensive positions. Apache crews rushed to arm their birds. The air smelled of oil and adrenaline. Elena strapped into her flight suit again, the motion automatic now, like breathing. Harris approached her, helmet under his arm. "You really think they'll hit us tonight?" "I know they will," she said. "And they'll come fast." He hesitated, then said softly, "Ramirez, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you." She gave a small smile. "Save it. Just keep your eyes open up there." At 2,300 hours, radar picked up the first signals, heat plumes moving fast through the dunes. Dozens of them. Davis's voice cut through the comms. "All pilots, scramble. Ironhawk, you're leading Strike Group 1. Alana's hands gripped the controls. The rotors screamed to life. The night wind tore through the camp as one Apache after another lifted off, their lights cutting thin lines across the darkness. In that moment, every fear, every scar, every doubt burned away. She was home again, where instinct ruled and gravity meant nothing. "Command, this is Iron Hawk," she said, her voice steady and cold. "Wheels up. We're bringing the sky to them." The engines roared as her Apache shot forward into the night, followed by a formation of gunships slicing through the air like steel predators. Below them, the enemy convoy moved unseen, but not for long. Because tonight, the hunter was back. The desert night was alive with motion, lights flickering across the dunes, dust clouds rising like ghosts, and the low, rhythmic roar of Apache turbines cutting through the silence. Captain Elena Ramirez, call sign Ghost Hawk, led the strike formation with nerves of steel. The enemy had regrouped, bringing in armored trucks, rocket teams, and even drone units. A full assault aimed at wiping out Camp Resolute and reclaiming what they'd lost. Her hands gripped the controls, fingers steady. Each beep on the targeting system, each radar ping, each streak of infrared light was a heartbeat, and tonight, the entire base was her pulse. "Cole," she said into the headset, "thermal scan all quadrants. I want every movement, every shadow, every heat signature. No surprises." Cole's voice was tense but calm. "Scanning now, Captain. They're moving fast, too fast for infantry to intercept in time." Elena's jaw tightened. "Then we intercept. Target the lead vehicles first. Don't let them regroup." Below, the enemy convoy carved through the sand, a winding serpent of destruction, unaware that the hunter was already above them. Tracers flashed across the desert, explosions igniting the horizon. Soldiers on the ground fired desperately, but without air cover, they were only slowing the inevitable. Elena banked the Apache low, skimming just above the dunes. Her targeting reticle locked onto the lead armored truck. She exhaled, then fired a Hellfire missile. The streak of light soared and struck perfectly. The truck erupted in fire, halting the convoy's advance. Target 1 down, Cole confirmed. 7 remaining in the front line. Good, Elena said. Hit the next 2 with rockets, then we clear the flank. The next minutes became a blur, missiles streaking, rounds tearing through sand and steel, explosions blooming like crimson flowers across the night. Elena dove and banked with precision, evading rockets, gunfire, and even one errant drone that tried to intercept her Apache. Captain, Cole shouted, voice tense. They've got 2 RPG teams moving on the east flank. If they hit the base, we lose our perimeter. Then east flank it is, Elena said, twisting the helicopter sideways, rotors slicing through the desert air. The M230 chain gun roared, firing bursts that shredded vehicles and scattered enemy troops. From above, she could see the faces of the soldiers on the ground, relief, awe, and terror mixed together as they witnessed the impossible. A single pilot cutting through what looked like an entire army. 8 minutes. That's all the enemy had before Ghost Hawk would reclaim the sky. She tracked the remaining trucks, 5 left, moving toward the northern ridge, trying to escape into the shadows. Elena calculated the angles, the distances, the wind. One wrong move, and a missile could hit her own men. Hold steady, Cole, she said, teeth gritted. We do this clean. The first truck launched an anti-air missile, a streak of fire converging fast. Elena banked hard, dropping flares as the missile veered off and exploded harmlessly in the sand. She felt the Apache shudder and regain balance. 2 more trucks in the lead, missiles locked, Cole reported. Fire. The explosions were deafening. The trucks erupted, fire rolling down the dunes like lava. One after another, the remaining convoy vehicles were destroyed, their flames lighting the night sky. Elena hovered for a moment, scanning for survivors or hidden threats. The only movement came from dust clouds settling into silence. But the danger wasn't over. A drone, fast, agile, and armed, zipped toward them from the ridge. Elena's instincts kicked in. Cole, manual override. Track that drone. He did, and she fired the chain gun. Tracers lanced through the air, intersecting the drone mid-flight. It exploded in a blinding flash, debris raining around them. Drone neutralized, Cole confirmed. Elena exhaled, muscles trembling slightly. 8 minutes. 15 confirmed targets. No casualties on their side? Command, this is Ghost Hawk, she said over the comms, voice steady. Area secured. Enemy neutralized. All targets destroyed. Back at Camp Resolute, soldiers watched from defensive positions, jaws slack in disbelief. The enemy threat was gone, and yet no one had even touched the Apache in pursuit. Lieutenant Harris, bandaged but standing, finally spoke, voice trembling. She did it. She really did it. Major Davis nodded, eyes fixed on the sky. She's a legend now. Elena didn't land immediately. She hovered over the ridge, watching the desert return to calm. The firelight from destroyed vehicles faded, leaving scorched sand. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember. Mosul, the grounding, the whispers, the humiliation. Every accusation, every loss, every sleepless night. And she realized those 8 minutes didn't just save a base. They reclaimed her life. As she finally brought the Apache down at the forward pad, she was met with silence and a slow, growing roar. Soldiers clapped. Mechanics cheered. Even Harris gave her a salute, one that finally meant something. She climbed out of the cockpit, legs unsteady, sweat and dust coating her skin. For a moment, she just stood there, letting it sink in. Major Davis approached. Captain Ramirez. Or should I say, Ghost Hawk. That was extraordinary. She allowed a small smile. Just doing my job, sir. No, Davis said softly. That was more than your job. That was something else. That was legend. Later, the debriefing room filled with brass and officers, all eager to hear the story. Elena stood, recounting the mission, every maneuver, every decision, every instinct. Colonel Briggs, normally stern and unflappable, finally spoke. Captain, you've done what many considered impossible. You've not only saved lives, you've restored faith in what we do here. She nodded. I don't fly for glory. I fly to make sure everyone else makes it home. Then why stop at 15? Briggs asked with a faint smile. Elena looked at him, deadpan. Because the rest of them didn't deserve another chance. The room went quiet, then erupted into applause. Soldiers and officers alike cheered. For once, recognition wasn't whispered. It was shouted, full of awe and respect. That night, Elena stood alone on the tarmac, staring up at the desert sky. The Apache sat idle behind her, its rotors still. The world was calm again, but she knew it was temporary. Threats would rise. Orders would come. Challenges would never end. But for now, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel the satisfaction of survival, skill, and revenge against those who had doubted her. Ghost Hawk, she whispered to the empty desert. You're back where you belong. And somewhere in the distance, as if acknowledging her, the wind whispered across the dunes, carrying the echo of rotors, fire, and a pilot who had conquered the sky in 8 unforgettable minutes. The desert had witnessed her rise. The world would never forget.